Hi, this is Circe Olson Woessner, the director of the Museum of the American Military Family, and this is our podcast, Grace Under Pressure. This is going to be a series of podcasts over the next months that will examine the military family life through the lens of gender, religion, race, identity, culture, and ethnicity. These topics form our acronym GRACE. I'm very excited to introduce our two new guests today, Connie Kinsey and Valerie Bonham. Welcome, ladies.
Hi.
So I wanted just to let our listeners know that the Museum of the American Military Family has had a writer in residence program since about 2013. Our first writer in residence was Caroline LeBlanc, and she created our Sacrifice and Service exhibit, which was displayed at the National Nuclear Museum for a summer and then traveled around New Mexico for several months after that. And then we had Paul Zobrod, who is our writer in residence emeritus, and he did several books with us. And after that, we had Laura Belden, who brought the anthology play and curriculum Shout. And then after that, we had Lauren Mosher, who worked on My Hero Dog and also Brat Time Stories. And now we have you two. And I know that was a little bit long-winded, but I think our listeners would like to know kind of the progression of our writer in residency. So in 2020, the museum put out a call for the 2020-2022 residency program, and multiple people expressed interest. But I think my announcement scared off a few people, but not you guys. So I wanted just to start off before we get into the whole crux of this podcast, asking, what did you think when I posted on various Brat Facebook groups that whoever became the next writer in residence for the museum was going to need to be able to write an essay a month for a year on topics, I'm doing air quotes, to be determined, and work under very vague guidelines. You know, I used the word, I even think I used the word paradoxical in the advertisement. I had a couple of people text me saying, can you be more specific? And I had to honestly say I couldn't. So I didn't even know what I was looking for. I wanted to know what compelled either of you to answer this crazy vague advertisement for a writer in residence.
Well, for me, Valerie, it was the only job I ever applied for where I met all the criteria. I could write, I'm a brat, I'm a veteran, and I'm a spouse. So, hey, I had to.
Well, that's good. So you weren't scared by paradoxical, and I have no idea what I want. I'm just wanting you to come on board.
Oh, no, that way I got to write anything I liked.
What about you, Connie?
Oh, as soon as I saw the announcement, I was so excited. It was like I had been training my entire life for this. My identity has always been as a military brat. I love writing, and I absolutely adore writing prompts. And so the idea that you were going to give me a one-word prompt to deal with was like a dream come true.
Wow. Well, when everybody submitted writing samples, you two were both so great. I couldn't choose just one of you. We just had to have both of you. And so I don't know what it's been like for you guys, but it's been really great for us. Do you remember what writing prompt I gave you as a kind of an audition?
It was identity, wasn't it?
It was. Thank you. I was like, oh my gosh, they forgot. So you guys have both been writers in residence for the Museum of the American Military Family since 2020, and you're midway through your second year. So I'd like you to introduce yourselves to our listeners. Let's start with Valerie first. I know you have a multifaceted military identity. You just mentioned brat and veteran and spouse, and you have a writing background. How do you describe or introduce yourself to people?
Well, for the first 50 years of my life, it was always in a military context. And so the mutual questions with anyone new were, well, where have you lived? You know, just in case we had both lived in the same places and had something in common. And now that I'm in a civilian environment, it's more responding to, you're not from around here, are you? So I have to explain that. So that's usually how it goes.
How about you, Connie?
I can identify with that. I have been here now for 37 years in the same house, which is amazing considering how I grew up. And we are still considered the new people what bought Frank Baird's old house. My identity is wrapped up strongly in being a brat. And so when they ask me where I'm from, I tell them I'm from everywhere. I was raised a Marine Corps brat.
Well, that's cool. Yeah. But do either of you mention that you're writers? I mean, I'm an author. I'm a published author. I'm a writer. I'm a blogger. Anything? Or is it just usually the brat spouse?
It depends. For me, it depends on it depends on the context.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have a day job. So if I'm at a business function, I usually don't bring up the fact that I write. I talk about the nonprofit that I work for. It just depends on the context.
It does.
But in my bio on Facebook and my webpage and stuff, everywhere it's plastered that I'm a writer.
Okay.
Yeah, online I identify as a writer, and a lot of my friends are writers. So what we mostly talk about are our works in progress. So, but other people, unless it comes up in a context, no.
Okay. So going back to the very beginnings of your residency, and while other people on the team and I were really trying to figure out what the GRACE project was going to be and what we were doing with it, you guys started writing essays. I think we had said a dozen essays in a year. And so I had kind of just written out 24 one-topic prompts, one-word prompts, and we divvied them up. So while we were still trying to figure out what we were doing, you guys were already writing away. And so, Valerie, I wanted to ask you, what were some of the topics you had? And then which was the easiest to write on and which one was the most difficult?
My essays included code, gender, religion, race, E Pluribus Unum, and war. The easiest one to write, strangely enough, was war, the longest one. And the hardest one was E Pluribus Unum.
Cool. What about you, Connie? What did you have?
I started with identity, which was ideal for me because I could still be writing on that subject. My most difficult one was gender, which, as you know, I finally ended up giving a pass on it. The gender question in the military is just too big for me to wrap my brain around.
So in kind of describing this project, we decided then, after you guys started writing, that we would invite other authors to write essays on the same words. So you guys were going to write an essay, and then we were going to have another author write a similar essay. And so every topic in this book, the book is called E Pluribus Unum, GRACE Under Pressure, has at least 2 essays. Some even have 3 or 4. So during the project, and this was true for you too. So during the project, it was important for us not to share any of your essays. So Connie couldn't see Valerie's, and Valerie couldn't see, anybody's, and none of the other writers could see each other's work. We specifically wanted to keep everyone writing essays in a vacuum. How did you feel not knowing even what your fellow writer in residence was writing about?
For me, I did wonder how my view would fit in to all the others. Because my culture is military, brat, veteran, and spouse. I don't know that I view the military like what you see the majority view of it is. And I both revere it and criticize it. And sometimes the criticism isn't appreciated. And so I wondered if I would fit in, because most people are civilian in the military, are civilian military, like you would be German American or Polish American or something like that. And I was just military. So I didn't know how I'd fit in.
How about you?
For me, I didn't really realize the vacuum until perhaps halfway into the project. I guess I thought we would swap stories and do things later, and then we didn't, and I started thinking about it. And for me, it was probably a good thing. It allowed me to go deep into my own thoughts without worrying about a preconceived construction for the essay.
And that's kind of what we wanted. And we wanted to just get people to write honest essays, you know, like our other writers, without being prompted to go in a specific direction. You know, we didn't want to say you need to do this or talk about this or anything. So literally nobody had guidance except the word. You know, they would call and ask, hey, what should I say? I said, well, you know, do what you think. But for the most part, nobody knew anything. And so I was curious in thinking about working in a vacuum. Have you guys even met before? I don't know, because you're in different parts of the country. Have you guys ever met on a Zoom and talked to each other?
No, we had that one conference call during the day. I think you and I were Zooming, and Valerie called in on the phone.
Yeah, I think I had problems.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hey,
so
well,
this is my first time seeing her. Yes.
I was gonna say, hey, Connie, meet Valerie. Valerie, meet Connie. You guys have been working together for almost 2 years. How do you do? That's funny. But you know, this is so indicative of military people. You can just, you know, plop yourself down and be at home and work and, you know, collaborate long distance. So getting back to the book, and I know that this interview is going to seem very disjointed because it's hard to explain what is the book and what is the project. But at any rate, the book E Pluribus Unum, GRAICE Under Pressure is out right now. It launched this week on Saturday. We're going to go big and wide and tell people about it. But I would like to ask each of you, if you were going to explain this project to people, and our listeners are also probably very confused and wondering, if you were going to give some sort of an elevator speech, what would you say about the project to get people to understand what it's all about? So Connie, how can you explain to our listeners what is this project?
Well, I live in a very civilian part of the world. So I first explained to them that I am a military brat, and for the first 14 years of my life, I had 24 different addresses. And I tell them that the project that I'm working on is a serious look at gender, religion, race, identity, culture, and ethnicity in the military environment as experienced by brats like me and retired individuals and active service individuals and etc. And from there, I tell them that the work is by turns heartwarming, amusing, thought-provoking, infuriating, just like the military itself. It's a snapshot of life in the military.
How about you, Valerie?
In some of the online groups, I have mentioned the book mostly in WAC veteran groups. And I think I mostly preface it with the book E Pluribus Unum is produced by the Museum of American Military Families, you know, to give it a background, which is near Albuquerque. And the book is a first-person look and a professional analysis of contemporaneous social pressures that affect the people affiliated with the services. And so that sounds kind of canned, but I've practiced it a couple of times. I've had to put something down that was kind of succinct so that they wouldn't go, oh, gee, I think I need to go, you know, water my dog or something. So
wow. Well, both of you guys did a great job. Now I have some ideas for marketing this. So thanks for that. But I think that does help to put this into context. I wanted to also add at this point, we had, you know, a survey that we distributed far and wide, and many people took part in the survey, and all of that information got put into this book as well. So the book it took 2 years. It took longer than we thought because we wanted to do a really good job with this, especially with these topics, and it was very timely. And the book was going through its first round of edits when the war in the Ukraine started, and I immediately reached out to Valerie to ask her to write an essay on war. And within a week, you'd written this ginormous essay. I think it's 10 or 11 pages long. How are you able to come up with all of that in such a quick amount of time? I'll tell you, it's about the most comprehensive, compelling essay on war I've ever read.
well, the glib answer is that I just copied decades of headlines. And a deeper answer is that at the time, all those headlines could have potentially affected my family. All of them, starting with, I just blanked on it, with Sinai. That's what it was when I was a kid. The first news thing I remember seeing was the war over Sinai. And potentially it could have affected my family, and I knew about it. And so writing them all down, it was just going through headlines, but I wasn't researching headlines, I was remembering headlines. And that's basically what it was.
Well, it was a beautiful essay. It was also very sobering to know that one person, you, have experienced 10 or 11 pages worth of headlines about war and violence in your lifetime. And that was what was very sobering to me, how much war and violence many people have experienced. So getting back to the project, this book is only part of the project. As part of the project, we had people, like I said, participate in an anonymous survey. And then we had a team of anthropologists sort and analyze all that data. And all of that is in the book. So not only do we have these beautiful essays on words, kind of as the frontispiece, we have running through the book survey results and small stories that anonymous people have contributed. And then we have the entire survey and this academic, scholarly, thoughtful analysis by the anthropologist explaining their feelings and their understandings of the information based on their expertise. And what was really good about the anthropologists, the two that did the sorting work, is they did not come from military backgrounds, so they were very unbiased, and that was very nice. We also had some somewhat famous people contribute quotes and thoughts to the book. So there's a lot there for a lot of people. So when you finally got your hard copy book a couple of weeks ago, were you surprised when you were reading through it and you saw the survey results? Were you surprised with the conclusions of the anthropologists or any of the writers, the other writers that submitted something? Connie?
You know, I studied anthropology in college,
Mm-hmm.
and I was in cultural anthropology,
Mm-hmm.
and statistics were never my strong point.
Mm-hmm.
But I really thought the conclusions were going to be pretty close to what they came up with,
Mm-hmm.
just based on my skills as a people watcher.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it was nice to see that affirmed,
Mm-hmm.
that we are indeed diverse. The military is, I like the analogy of a tossed salad opposed to a melting pot. We have anybody and everybody is in the military, and together they form one cohesive
Salad.
yeah. But they're all individuals, and it works.
Mm.
It's the E Pluribus Unum, it works.
Yeah. Valerie, what about you?
Well, I was reassured when I read the first sentence of the results, and it included the military community is not monolithic. And that made me feel better about my concern at not fitting in with the perceptions of the other writers. So I really like that.
Well, and speaking of the other writers, the companion essays were written by people ages 9 to 91. And it covered every single generation from Generation Alpha, which is the 9-year-old, through the silent generation. And so both of you are boomers. And you wrote the anchor essay. So you wrote the essay that started off the chapter. And then another author from a different generation, generally, not always, wrote a companion essay. And so now that you've seen the finished book, and you obviously have read your essays, and then you've read the person who wrote an essay on the same word, what struck you about differences of opinion generationally? Any of you?
Yeah, first of all, I was a child. My dad, was out of the Marine Corps by the time I was 14. And so I was viewing things often through the eyes of a child. But it was also, very much a zeitgeist. It was the late 60s. The country was exploding. I was not, I would have been 10 when all of that was happening. And I wasn't super aware of what was going on, but I realized that we were living in interesting times. And the different generations, there seems to be a pattern of people become a little bit more critical of the military as the generations proceed. And I thought that was curious.
What about you, Valerie? What did you think? What struck you about the differences of opinions?
Well, first off, little Sarah Williamson's essay was so heartwarming with on her note paper and with her little drawing. I really liked that. And otherwise, I appreciated seeing both the differences in the generational experiences and our common touch points.
Mhm.
And so, over the decades, social differences did happen.
Mhm.
When I was a kid, okay, it was Elvis Presley causing all sorts of fainting spells among the older people. And then by the time my younger kids were that age, I'd be driving down the Autobahn, with the kids in the back, and hear on the radios, the police, and here comes the stalker song. And so even though they were different influences,
Mhm.
they were still common things that affected us from, the greater world.
Mhm.
And even though we had these differences, there was still a lot in common. And I saw that in the essays.
Yeah, yeah. I thought of some of the topics have multiple looks at a word. I think identity had multiple examples, and so did I think gender too. And it is interesting to see the differences between a 20-something identifying gender and a 60-something identifying gender. And I thought that was very interesting. So why do you guys think that this project is important? Or do you think it's important? I'm just assuming it's important. Maybe it's really not important. Why do you think?
Well, I live in Appalachia, and I'm of Appalachian stock. And the oral storytelling tradition is very important here. Stories are passed down and passed down and passed down.
Mhm.
And there's a big push in Appalachia to get these things written down.
Mhm.
And the book is important to me because that's what we're doing with the military stories.
Mhm.
I don't think some of these stories have ever been told or
Mhm.
not told in a way that's offered to the general public. I think it's a critical work. I think it's very important.
Yeah, I agree with Connie. The impressions of from a first person viewpoint of what people actually experience, that doesn't often get out into the world. And it's important what we went through. How did it feel to experience these various things? For me, it was at one point was during the Cuban Missile Crisis. My mom, me, and my brother and sister, we were still at Ellsworth Air Force Base, and my dad had been sent to Bermuda where we were going. And so we were sitting on a Minuteman field target while my dad was sitting in the middle of a bunch of Russian warships with nuclear missiles on them. And so, how do you feel? Sitting on a target with your dad in the middle of an ocean, how does that feel to you?
Exactly.
And so learning these things and then having your professionals look at it and break it down into that objective viewpoint, I think it's significant.
And I think what also is important is because the survey was anonymous, and because we encouraged open-ended, we asked open-ended questions, people wrote stories and they were anonymous. So they could be brutally honest. They could tell really sad stories. They could tell stories that were that would make someone angry to read. And they also told the heartwarming stories. And so I think that that piece of anonymity offered opportunities for even more stories to come out that would not come out if the author were known. And I thought that was very interesting. So this one is coming out as soon as I hit send to all the press release places that we send things to. But we're working behind the scenes on another book already. Many of our viewers have heard and have already sent in stories. And Valerie has been heading up the Host Nation Hospitality book, and we're wrapping up the call for stories on August 1st. It will be out hopefully in October or November in time for the holidays. So Valerie, what have you been doing with the Host Nation Hospitality book?
Well, excuse me. As I mentioned off the recording to you, I just finished listening to all 350 some odd pages of the book, and you said there's more now.
There's more now.
Oh, heavenly days. And so, you know, it took a lot longer listening to it because I did not want to just skim over it. Your eyes slip over things that either you think you know all about, or, you know, you're tired or something like that. So I listened to the whole thing, and it took longer than reading it. So I only just finished it. And at the same time, while I was listening, I was making notes for each paragraph as to, you know, what this one little piece was. And then I'll go back and go through the notes for each section and come up with the transitional essays that will go between everything to tie it all together. And with luck and good night rest, I hope that it comes out well.
Oh, I'm sure it will. The two of you have brought such quality to our projects. I mean, it's just amazing. Yeah, so the Host Nation Hospitality book, we solicited submissions from people all over the world to talk about fun and family and life on base and interactions with people from different countries. And we have German historians who have sent in pieces, local people sending in stories, brats and veterans. We had a person submit poetry, another one, a snippet of a screenplay he's working on. It's very eclectic. We're very proud to have several service organizations participating, as well as some historians. So it's a really comprehensive book, and it's different than this current one. It is more of a companion with Schooling with Uncle Sam. So it's just a fun, comfortable, nostalgic read. Well, I wouldn't say comfortable, because there are some stories in this one that will remind people about war and the aftermath. So Connie is standing by to help Laura and me with Still Shouting, which is the companion piece to Shout. And so that's going to be out in 2023. It's still in the works. So I wanted to ask both of you, is there anything that you would like to add about the GRACE project, or the writer in residency, or anything you're doing in your writing life that you'd like our listeners to know?
Well, with respect to the GRACE book, I think we should mention that it is just packed full of photos. And so we have a visual history as well as the stories of the individuals.
You know, you're right. And there's artwork in there too. Brandon Palma, who was a former student of mine at Roosevelt Roads Middle High School back in the day. He's a graphic designer. He makes clothes. He has a line of products. He's so talented. And I messaged him and I said, hey, do you want to do the graphics for this? And he's like, yes, Mrs. Woessner. I said, listen, you don't need to call me Mrs. Woessner anymore. You know? but yes, so yeah, so there's beautiful graphics, and you are right, photographs, and they're pictures that people have sent in. So that's another piece to this whole project. some people submitted photographs without participating in the survey. Some of the photos are our personal ones. All of the people that were quoted, most of them did not participate in the survey. So everybody was vacuuming, and it's kind of cool because it did work well, I think. So good, that's important for people to know. Anything else, Connie, that you wanted to add? I was giving you an opportunity to talk more about your work or any other thoughts, and then I'll ask Valerie.
Well, I came out of this project, I've always identified as being a military brat, but I never stopped to think how, I'm 62 years old. And why is it that 14 years of my life has so profoundly affected me that, all of these decades later, it's still one of the very first things I tell people about myself. And so I've had a lot of time to think about that.
Mhm.
And I'm also working on my memoir about growing up as a brat during the Vietnam era. And I'm reading my dad's letters and his journals and his memoir. And all of this is starting to blend in together for me. And it's just been a real examination of my life. It's been such a blessing to me.
Wow. You're right though, because I'm going to be 60 this year, and I identify as a brat too. I'm an overseas brat. That's the first thing I say, over spouse, over mom. Interesting. Valerie, what would you like to add that our listeners might want to know that I didn't ask?
Well, I hope that Mr. Pierce, who taught 8th grade in Bermuda, a Eustacia school,
Exactly.
Credo Dia. And I want to tell him that I am not a total cop-out who froze on the 500-word essay that he assigned for my final grade. And I flunked 8th grade English because I couldn't do it. So, Mr. Pierce, I can do it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we'll send him a copy. We'll send him a copy of your war essay. You had a week and it's 10 pages, and it wasn't 10 pages double spaced. It was 10. I think I had to, the font was small even. Well, good for you. But that's a testimony to, I have to put in a plug for the Eustacia, the Dodds, the Dodia schools. They created good people, even the ones that failed. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That was just one fail.
Well, I had similar results in math, and I was teaching for a Dodd school in Heidelberg. And I was subbing. I walked into school for my first day to sub, and I run right into my math teacher. And now I'm a grown adult now. I've been away from school for,
Right.
7-8 years. And he saw me, and his mouth went down into a little frown, and he goes, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I'm a teacher."
Satisfaction.
So anything else, Valerie?
Just that it was a very satisfying experience to be challenged on the single word prompts about things that I hadn't examined closely. I'd gone through them. There was something to say about all of them, but I had never deeply examined them. And so it was satisfying to be able to come up with something that I hadn't thought about. That was nice.
So I'll be putting the link to purchase this book in the notes page underneath the podcast for our viewers, so they can just click and buy. This is impromptu, without thinking about it much. What did you learn most about yourself while working on the GRACE project?
Oh, heavenly days.
Quick. Connie.
I can write.
I can answer.
Okay.
I worked on this project while I had long COVID. And I fatigued very easily, and I had brain fog, and I was just a physical mess for most of this time. But the project was important to me, and I proved to myself that I could do it.
Oh,
Right.
excellent. And what about you, Valerie?
Pretty much the same thing. This was, I had worked on a magazine before, but that one, I pretty much knew what I was going to write because it too came from headlines.
Mhm.
And so this was something different, definitely something different. And so I was really pleased, first off, to participate. Thank you for asking. I was really, when I saw that thing, I said, oh, I could do that. I bet I could do that.
Yeah, I
And
don't know what
did
it
do
is,
that.
but I can do it.
Yes, it looks like something. So thank you for coming up with it
Yes.
and asking us. Thank you very much.
Well, it would not have been nearly as good without you. Both of you. The feedback I've gotten from the first round of people who we sent the authors their copies ahead of time. The first thing has been, we love the essays, they love the essays. I haven't heard much about the data, but there are people, but these are all writers, so of course they're going to be drawn to the essays, but there are going to be scholars out there. There are going to be the numbers crunchers that will look at the data. But as a whole, people are like, I am enjoying it. I am just going through these essays. And I'll tell you, without you two anchoring it, the book would not be as beautiful and as solid as it is. And so I wanted to thank you. Wow, time has really flown here. We could just be on here all day, but we need to wrap it up. And I wanted to tell our listeners again that this podcast has been brought to you by the Museum of the American Military Family and Learning Center. That's us. We're located 7 miles outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico. And our podcasts are supported in part by New Mexico Arts, the New Mexico Humanities Council, Sandia Area Credit Union, and organizations like Military Brats Seal and Military Brats Registry. Both of you have author pages, right? And blogs. So we could put a link to your blogs in the notes underneath the this podcast too. So I will put your writing information underneath there. I just wanted to say that. So now I have to really wrap it up. I'm like shiny. So ladies, it has been absolutely a pleasure talking to you. This is such an important project. I think I'm hoping that our listeners are excited to see what it is that we came up with, to read your beautiful words and the words of both the known and the unknown people. So thank you for participating, and thanks for your time today. It's been wonderful.
And thank you for being the brainchild for all of this.
Agreed.
Well, thank you. All right. Bye.